They thought they could trick me with a dream house worth $750,000. They thought I was naive, powerless, and too soft to fight back. But what they didn't know was that every brick of that house became a weapon in my revenge. This is how it all began. Scene 1. The dream that looked too perfect. The listing glowed on Clara's phone screen like a beacon. Spacious 4-bedroom, modern finishes, $750,000. She almost laughed when she saw it. $750,000? Who in their right mind thinks that's affordable? Clara was 29, a paralegal who had been saving for years to buy her first home. Her savings account was modest. Nothing near what a house like this would demand. And yet, something about the ad pulled her in. The photos were perfect. Sunlight streaming through tall windows, hardwood floors polished to a shine, a kitchen with marble counters that looked like they belonged in a magazine. She closed her eyes for a moment and imagined it. Me, sipping coffee by that window. Mom finally having a guest room instead of a couch to sleep on. A space that's mine, safe, untouchable. It was a dream. And dreams, she reminded herself, were dangerous things. But this dream would soon become a nightmare because the house wasn't just a listing. It was bait. When Clara contacted the realtor, she expected professionalism. What she got was Vanessa. Vanessa was the kind of woman who walked into a room and made sure everyone noticed. Perfect hair, sharp suits, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was polite, but there was something slick about her. Something rehearsed. "Clara, sweetheart," Vanessa purred over the phone, "this house is going to change your life. Now, I know $750,000 sounds steep, but I can work with you. I can make things easier." Easier. That word stuck in Clara's mind. And then came the second player, Mark, Vanessa's so-called business partner. He was older, quieter, the type who leaned in just a little too close when he spoke, making Clara's skin crawl. Together, Vanessa and Mark painted a picture of opportunity. They talked about creative financing, special arrangements, and how Clara was exactly the type of buyer they wanted. But Clara wasn't stupid. She'd worked in law long enough to smell when something was off. And something here reeked. At first, it was little things. Vanessa would gush about how mature Clara was for someone with her background, though she never explained what that meant. Mark would sigh dramatically about other buyers circling the property, creating urgency where none existed. And every conversation ended the same way. "If you don't act now, Clara, you'll lose this chance forever." Clara wanted a home. Badly. But she didn't want to be someone's fool. So she hesitated. And that hesitation lit the first spark of hostility in Vanessa's carefully painted smile. One evening, Clara got an email. Supposedly from the mortgage broker Vanessa had recommended. It was sloppy. Misspelled words, vague promises of low monthly payments, and a request for Clara's personal banking information. Her stomach twisted. "They really think I'm that stupid?" She forwarded the email to a friend in banking. Within hours, she had her answer. The broker didn't exist. The entire thing was a setup. That night, Clara sat at her kitchen table, staring at the glowing screen. Anger bubbled in her chest. Vanessa and Mark weren't selling houses. They were setting traps. And she had almost walked into one. The next time she met Vanessa, Clara kept her voice steady. "Your mortgage broker doesn't exist." For a split second, the mask slipped. Vanessa's smile faltered. But just as quickly, it returned, sharper than before. "Oh, Clara," she laughed, waving a manicured hand, "you must be mistaken. These things happen all the time. Mix-ups. Typos. Nothing serious." Mark leaned forward. His voice was low, almost threatening. "You should be careful who you accuse. People might think you're ungrateful." Ungrateful. The word tasted like poison. Clara didn't argue. She didn't storm out. She just smiled politely, gathered her papers, and left. But inside, a storm was brewing. They thought she'd back down. They thought fear would silence her. Instead, they had just written the first chapter of their own downfall. Days after Clara's quiet confrontation, the calls started. At first, it was Vanessa. Sweet, sugar-dipped voicemails. Clara, darling, I hope we didn't leave things on the wrong note. I've got an even better financing option for you. Call me back, Then it was Mark. His voice wasn't sweet. It was cold. You don't want to make enemies in this town. Sign the papers. Be smart. The shift was clear. The friendly mask was gone. Now it was intimidation. Clara saved every voicemail, every email, every message. Her legal instincts whispered, document everything. You'll need it. But with each call, her chest tightened. Her safe little world was shrinking. It wasn't long before Clara noticed the stares. At the grocery store. At the coffee shop. Whispers that followed her like shadows. One evening, her neighbor slipped up. So, you really thought you could afford a $750,000 house? Must be nice to live in a fantasy. Clara froze. How the hell do they know? The answer came quickly. Vanessa. On a local community Facebook group, there it was. Some people don't understand their limits. Imagine wasting our time chasing a $750,000 property you can't afford. Pathetic. It didn't say her name. It didn't need to. Everyone knew. Her cheeks burned as she scrolled through the comments. People like that give real buyers a bad name. Entitled much. I heard she tried to scam the realtor, not the other way around. The narrative had flipped. Clara wasn't the victim anymore. She was the clown. That night, Clara sat at her kitchen table, fists clenched around a mug of tea gone cold. Her mother watched her carefully. What happened, sweetheart? Clara's throat ached. They're destroying me, Mom. They're making me look like a fool. Like I'm crazy. Her mother's hand covered hers, warm and steady. Then don't let them. You've always been stronger than you think. Remember when you were 16 and your teacher accused you of cheating? You didn't cry, Clara. You fought back. You proved them wrong. Do it again. Clara wanted to believe her. But this felt bigger. Uglier. And yet, something inside her hardened. If they want war, they'll get war. The next week, Clara received a letter. Official letterhead. Bold text. Final notice. You are required to respond regarding your contractual obligations to purchase the property at 122 Willow Lane. Her blood ran cold. She hadn't signed anything. She had been careful. She flipped through the pages, heart pounding. At the back was a signature. Her signature. Except, it wasn't hers. The bastards had forged her name. Her hands shook as she held the paper. Anger surged through her veins hotter than fire. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was fraud. And they thought they could get away with it. That night, Clara didn't cry. She didn't crumble. She opened her laptop, organized the files she had saved, voicemails, emails, screenshots of social media posts. She scanned the fraudulent documents and highlighted every inconsistency. Her pulse slowed as her plan took shape. She wouldn't just defend herself. She wouldn't just expose them. She would make sure Vanessa and Mark lost everything, their money, their reputation, their power. And the sweetest part? She'd use their own arrogance against them. It started with letters. Then phone calls. Then, visits. One evening, Clara pulled into her driveway and noticed muddy boot prints on her porch. No package. No flyer. Just footprints. Her stomach sank. Later that night, a text message buzzed her phone. You should have just signed. We know where you live. She stared at the glowing screen, heart pounding so loud it drowned out every thought. Her mother, sitting in the living room, noticed her pale face. Clara. What is it? Clara lied. Nothing, Mom. Just spam. But inside, panic coiled tighter. Vanessa and Mark weren't playing games anymore. Over the next week, Clara barely slept. She jumped at every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the barking of a dog outside. Work became unbearable. Clients cancelled appointments without explanation. Colleagues avoided her. The smear campaign was working. One afternoon, she overheard two co-workers whispering. She's the one who tried to scam a realtor, right? Yeah, I heard she forged her own papers and blamed someone else. Clara ducked into the bathroom, locked the stall, and pressed her hand against her mouth to stop the sobs. Her reflection in the mirror was unrecognizable, sunken eyes, trembling hands, a woman unraveling. She whispered to herself, maybe I should just give up. Maybe I should just let it go. But deep down, she knew, giving up meant letting them win. The turning point came from an unlikely source, her mother. One night, Clara found her mother sitting at the kitchen table with an old photo album. She was staring at a picture of Clara as a teenager, standing proudly at a science fair with a blue ribbon in her hands. You always fought for what you believed in, her mother said softly. Remember how that teacher accused you of stealing your project? You didn't cry. You didn't hide. You proved her wrong. That's who you are. Clara felt something stir inside her chest. A memory. A reminder. Her mother reached across the table, eyes fierce. Don't let these people steal that fire from you. They want you broken. Don't give them the satisfaction. For the first time in weeks, Clara straightened her spine. She whispered, "You're right. I'm not done yet." Clara started small. She went back through every voicemail, every email, every text. She organized them into folders labeled threats, forgery, defamation. She created a timeline of events, meticulously noting dates and times. She began researching fraud cases, contract law, and real estate licensing requirements. The more she read, the more she realized how sloppy Vanessa and Mark had been. She wasn't powerless. She had evidence. And with evidence came power. Just as Clara was regaining her footing, Vanessa made her boldest move yet. One afternoon, Clara was served with papers, an official lawsuit claiming breach of contract. The forged signature. The falsified agreement. It was all there. Vanessa and Mark were trying to drag her into court, to bleed her dry financially, to humiliate her publicly. For a moment, Clara's knees buckled. They're really going to ruin me. But then, anger burned through the fear. If Vanessa thought this would break her, she was wrong. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. That night, Clara sat at her desk with a glass of tea, the lawsuit papers spread before her. Her hands didn't shake anymore. Her mind was clear. She whispered to herself, almost like a vow. You wanted me to sign my life away. You wanted to make me look like a fool. But you made one mistake. You underestimated me. She closed the folder and leaned back in her chair, a small smile tugging at her lips. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about revenge. The day of the hearing arrived. Clara walked into the courthouse dressed simply, dark blazer, no jewelry, hair tied back. Vanessa and Mark were already there, whispering and laughing like predators circling their prey. Vanessa wore a bright red dress, the kind of outfit meant to scream confidence and control. When Clara sat down, Vanessa leaned just far enough to whisper, "Enjoy your last day of freedom." Clara didn't answer. She only opened her folder and placed it on the desk. Inside were neatly labeled tabs, each one a dagger waiting to be drawn. The opposing attorney presented the case with smug certainty. Your Honor, this woman, Clara Thompson, knowingly signed a contract for the purchase of a $750,000 property. She then attempted to back out, causing my clients, Mr. and Mrs. Greenfield, tremendous financial and emotional damage. Mark nodded solemnly like an injured saint. Vanessa dabbed her eyes dramatically with a tissue. Clara sat still, letting them perform their act. But inside, she was counting down the minutes until their lies unraveled. When it was Clara's turn, she stood slowly, heart pounding but voice steady. Your Honor, she began, I never signed that contract. In fact, I can prove that what you see in front of you is not just a lie, but a forgery. The courtroom stirred. Vanessa's smile faltered for the first time. Clara handed over her folder to the bailiff. Inside, you'll find a full record of emails, text messages, and phone calls showing weeks of harassment and threats. You'll also find proof of fraudulent attempts to impersonate me, signatures, documents, and correspondence I never authorized. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. And, Your Honor, I have something else. The doors opened, and in walked a forensic handwriting analyst Clara had quietly hired. The expert testified calmly, methodically. He projected enlarged versions of Clara's authentic signature versus the contract signature. The differences were glaring: stroke angle, pressure, spacing. "This," he said, pointing to the contract, "is a forgery." Gasps echoed through the room. Vanessa shifted in her seat, her knuckles white against the table. Mark looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. But Clara wasn't finished. She introduced phone records showing Vanessa had called her at odd hours from blocked numbers. She showed texts with time-stamps matching nights Clara had documented strange noises outside her home. And then, like the final nail in a coffin, she revealed a recording. On the speakers, Vanessa's voice rang out, sharp and venomous. "You'll regret this, Clara. You'll lose everything. We'll make sure of it." The courtroom froze. Vanessa's lawyer buried his face in his hands. For the first time, Vanessa broke. She stood, pointing at Clara, her face twisted with rage. "She's lying. She's framing us. This is all a setup." The judge slammed the gavel. "Sit down, Mrs. Greenfield." But it was too late. The mask had slipped. The courtroom had seen her for who she truly was. Mark tried to calm her, whispering frantically, but Vanessa shoved him away. Their united front shattered right there in front of everyone. The judge's ruling was swift and merciless. The contract was deemed fraudulent. The lawsuit was dismissed. Clara was cleared of all accusations. But that wasn't all. The judge referred the matter to the district attorney for potential criminal charges: fraud, harassment, and attempted extortion. Vanessa and Mark's faces drained of color. Clara sat silently, but inside, her soul roared. When the gavel fell for the last time, Clara gathered her papers calmly. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She walked past Vanessa, who sat trembling, mascara streaking her cheeks. Clara leaned in just enough to whisper, "You should have chosen someone else to mess with." And then she walked out into the sunlight, the weight finally lifting from her chest. The very next day, local headlines exploded. Realtor couple accused of forgery and fraud. $750K house scam exposed in court. Vanessa and Mark's smiling professional headshots were plastered across news sites, but now they weren't symbols of success, they were emblems of scandal. Clients pulled out of contracts. Deals collapsed overnight. The once respected Greenfield name became synonymous with deception. On Facebook and Twitter, people who had once whispered doubts now spoke loudly. "I knew something was off with them. They tried the same scare tactics on me last year." Good for Clara, finally someone stood up to those snakes. Screenshots of the forged contract circulated online. The audio clip of Vanessa's threat went viral, played and replayed with captions like, "This is the real Vanessa Greenfield." The court of public opinion was ruthless, and it never forgot. Within weeks, the real estate board suspended Vanessa's license pending investigation. Mark, tied to her schemes, lost his as well. Their office closed. Employees quit. Their nameplate was ripped off the door. One by one, their assets began to disappear: luxury cars repossessed, vacation homes sold off to cover mounting legal fees. The couple who once boasted about wealth and power were suddenly scraping to stay afloat. Meanwhile, Clara's life quietly began to heal. The cloud over her reputation lifted. Clients returned, some apologizing for doubting her. Her business slowly flourished again. But more importantly, Clara rediscovered herself. She took walks without looking over her shoulder. She laughed with her mother again. She hosted a small dinner with close friends, the first in months. For the first time, she felt peace. Months later, Clara ran into Vanessa by chance in a grocery store parking lot. Vanessa looked nothing like the woman who had once strutted into the courtroom in a red dress. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes wrinkled, her eyes hollow. When she spotted Clara, Vanessa froze. For a moment, the two women locked eyes, predator and prey, but their roles reversed. Vanessa muttered, almost pleading, "Are you happy now?" Clara's gaze was calm, steady. "I'm not happy about what you did to me. But I am happy you can't hurt anyone else." She turned and walked away, leaving Vanessa trembling in the shadow of her own destruction. That night, Clara sat on her porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. She thought about everything she had endured: the fear, The isolation, the lies. She thought about the strength she never knew she had until it was tested. She realized revenge wasn't about destroying Vanessa and Mark. It was about reclaiming her own life, her dignity, her peace. And in that, she had won. Vanessa and Mark built their empire on lies, but lies can't stand forever. In trying to steal Clara's future, they lost their own. And Clara? She emerged stronger, wiser, unbroken. Because sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't just watching your enemies fall, it's standing tall when the smoke clears, knowing they could not destroy you. If you made it this far, you know this wasn't just a story about fraud, it was a story about resilience, about fighting back when the odds are stacked against you. What do you think? Did Clara get the justice she deserved, or would you have taken revenge even further? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories of justice, revenge, and triumph. Until next time, stay strong.